In this video, we're going to be doing our last and final improvements to the voxel editor. You'll be able to place blocks and see a preview little nub tool that tells you what kind of block you're going to place as well as where it's going to be placed. You'll also be able to use scroll wheel to select different blocks. So I hope you're excited and I'll see you in there. All right, before we get into actually making our UI for our voxel editor, I'm going to solve a problem that I wasn't able to solve in the previous videos, which is making this block snap to the corners of the other blocks. All right, so to start, I realized I basically have it correctly adding itself to the sides of blocks. So all I have to do now is just say math.floor, and for math.floor, we're using the Unity Mathematics library, plus 0.5, plus actually a new float 3 that's 0.5, 0.5, and 0.5. And that's, for some reason we have to add an F on the end, but all right. And now, if you look here and I click play, you'll see that it is actually snapping onto all the different sides. But I want to improve this even further. And to do that, what I can change here is simply subtract the hit.normal. So move it into the side of the block. And here we also need to cast this to a float 3. So convert it to a float 3, because this is currently a vector 3. And now, if we click play, you'll see we do indeed have a very cool block being added onto the sides of our blocks, and this tells us where we're going to be adding a block. So if I click here, we add another block. So just very intuitive, very simple and cool tool. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create in our scripts folder, I'm going to create a new folder called UI. I'm going to create a C# script, and I'm going to call this voxel editor visuals. And the other thing I'm going to do is change this to the voxel editor, just because I think that's a much better name. And then we're going to also rename it in here to voxel editor. It does not let me edit for some reason. Let's try this again. Voxel editor. There we go, editor. All right, now let's open it up in Unity. Make sure that our editor script is still working. Voxel editor script, yep, it's working. All right, so now for our editor visuals, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to, well, first off, I wanna do something really cool. So this block that tells us what we are adding to our, I want it to also tell us, not only just tell us where we're adding the block, but also show us the voxel color that we're going to use. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and go into Art and Shaders, and I'm going to create a new shader graph, URP, lit shader. I'm going to call this color shader, or color, just color. And then we're going to open this up. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a property that's a vector 3. Yeah, a vector 3. I'm going to call this color. And if I go into the graph inspector, just make sure, we need to make sure that we know what this name is. So the reference name is color. We're going to need that later, so it's underscore color. Right, and then in here, I'm literally just going to drag this out and connect it to the color, and that's it. All right, now let's go ahead and open up our voxel editor visuals, and in here, we're going to take in a serialized field, private mesh renderer, and renderer of the visual, so the indicator renderer, and then in private void on enable or start, let's just do start. We're going to say, we're going to get a reference to its material. So we're going to say private material, and we need to get the material instance of the indicator's renderer. So we're going to say indicator renderer dot material. We're going to say our material is going to equal the material of this renderer. And then let's go ahead and set that reference. So we're going to set our voxel editor visuals into a new empty game object and editor visuals. And we can just reset that. It really doesn't matter where we put the script. All right, and now we just need access to our indicator's mesh renderer. Now in private void update. And we're also going to take a serialized field private reference to our voxel palette. We'll call this our palette. Now in the palette, what I want to do is I want to use the mouse scroll wheel to select a specific voxel in our palette. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to equal float mouse scroll. It's going to equal input dot mouse scroll delta. All right. And this is a vector 2, so I just want the dot y. I'm going to create a private float current selection is going to equal 0. And then our material, and actually we don't even need a reference to this. As long as we have the reference to the renderer, we can just say indicator renderer dot material dot set color. Now remember, I said we need to remember what the property name for that property we created in the shader was. It's color. We can set that equal to voxel palette, and actually we'll just call it palette at, for now, 0, or no, 1, and palette dot color. So we're getting a specific voxel's color, and we're setting the color of the material to that. So for now, let's just set it to 1, which I believe is sand, just to see how this looks. And we'll put this in the start. All right. Let's see if this works. So what should happen to our indicator is it should set itself to the first voxel in our voxel palette. So our voxel palette, yeah, is sand. What I forgot to do is we need to export the shader, so save asset. All right, so our color shader, we need to create a material for it. So material, I'm gonna call this color, and then we're just gonna select the the shader graphs color. Now take this material called color and add it to our indicator. And that'll just say that our indicator's color is going to be based on what we set in this script right here. So let's go ahead and try this. And we can see it's not working. Oh, that's right. So our editor visuals, we haven't added the voxel palette yet. So let's go ahead and do this. Voxel palette. All right, now click play. Let's see. And yes, it's working. We have sand color. So if we select the sand voxel, we will get sand color. Now let's set the color based on our scroll wheel of our selected color. So let's say current color selection. I'm going to plus equal the mouse delta dot y. And now we need to clamp this to only be within 0 or the maximum number of voxel types, which is going to be if current selection is greater than voxel palette dot voxel types dot length. We're going to set current selection equal to voxel types dot length. And then if current selection is less than 0, current selection is going to equal 0. All right, so now we've clamped it Now what we can do is our indicator rendered on material dot set color is going to equal the int index is going to equal our voxel, and we're going to say current selection. We're going to round it, so math.round, and we can use, say, using unity.mathematics, and cannot convert float to int, and we'll say convert this to an integer now that we've rounded it. We'll say voxel, and we pass that in to our palette for the selected voxel. All right, and then the other thing, I just realized we cannot have a voxel type of 0, so we actually need to make this, if it's less than 1, so we're going to clamp it to 1. And we can just set it to 1 here. All right, that should work. Let's go ahead and see what happens. So in Unity, if I do my scroll wheel, blue, water, sand. So we only get water and sand. I believe we had more types than that. Let's go to our voxel palette. So we're skipping rock. That's how fast it's moving. I think that's what's happening, is we're just skipping rock. Let's see, rock and water. Sand, rock, and water. So we're just moving a little too fast. But it is working, so yay. Now let's go ahead and let's see. Mouse scroll delta times 0.5. We're just going to create this as a variable serialized field, private float selection speed, and let's just set that to 0.5. And let's multiply this by the selection speed. Now if we click play, selecting a block should be a little smoother for us. Nope, it's still super fast. But anyway, we can select different blocks. So now if I just look around, I can see that the block I've selected is different colors. All right. Now, since we have this awesome feature, I want to go back into our voxel editor. Now that I've renamed it to voxel editor, it was called voxel target. And we want to be able to add a block in empty space, right? So no longer are we going to set active, false, and true. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if mouse like get button down here, then we're also going to say the indicator's position is going to equal a camera dot forward times, and actually camera dot position, so camera dot position plus camera dot forward times maximum distance, and we're gonna do this. And then because math.floor can take in a whole vector 3 and just round the whole thing, instead of doing what we were doing, is which was just a new vector 3, and we were rounding each one, so math.f.round, right? Like every single one of them. We don't want to do that anymore. We can just use math.round and it'll take care of everything. So if I just go into here, math.round, it just takes in a whole vector 3 and rounds it. So super simple. Let me click play. Let's just see, and yeah, it does work. Yeah. All right, now let's go ahead and let's change it so that our grid position is not equal to the hit dot point. Instead, let's say a vector 3 target, and we're just going to equal math.round here. And then we could say target equals there, and no longer do we need this. we can just pass in the target. And the target. All right. Let's go ahead and see. Yeah, it should be working. Yeah, and I can add a block in midair. And one other thing I realized is am I rounding the position correctly? I actually need to add half of, because if I go into the midair and I add a block, it adds it in the corner. So let's go ahead and add 0.5 to the visual. So editor visuals, sorry, voxel editor. And the indicator target is going to equal target plus a new float 3 of 0.5 f and 0.5 f and 0.5 f. All right, let's try that again. This offsets our visual correctly. Seems it did not like this. Right, so let's do a float 3. All right. Should be able to get it working now. Yeah, so if I click, we're adding a block. Awesome. All right. One final thing, I don't like the fact that this is like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into here and I'm going to move all this code for the selection of the current voxel into our voxel editor. Obviously it's not going to work right off the bat. Let's put this in start, and then all this code, let's add it into its own function. So let's rename this to voxel selection. Let's move it down here at the bottom, and let's put this in update. Yep, and then we'll say voxel placement. And we'll say private void voxel placement. Yep. All right, and then we can just say voxel placement here in update. There we go. And we don't actually have to set this color since we're going to set it in update every single frame. So now with that, I can, instead of storing the voxel here, I'm going to create a private byte voxel, and we're going to set voxel like this, math.round to a byte. And now in using this voxel variable, we can actually add any type of voxel we want in here. So when we say set voxel right here, we'll remove 2 with voxel and remove 2 with voxel, and now we can add any type of voxel that we want. So water, sand, dirt. So let's go ahead and let's try this. And it's erroring for some reason. Let's see. Oh, yeah. In our player, in the voxel editor, we never set up all these references that we need to. So the indicators, mesh renderer, and the voxel palette. Yeah. All right, let's try this again. And yeah, we can say click and drop sand. We can drop water if I scroll to water. And we can add rock if we want to. And yeah, I think that's a very, very nice voxel editor. And now let's work on the UI. So I want to have a little thing that button and text, or no, just text that says the voxel type, as well as a little image with a color indicating the voxel type's color. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go into editor visuals, and that's what this script is really for. And in editor visuals, let's create a serialize field, private. And we're also going to need a voxel palette, so the voxel palette, and serialize field, private. And this is going to be a reference to our voxel editor, so voxel editor. And we're going to call this the editor. And we're actually going to need to access the current voxel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a public byte. I'm going to call this voxel, and it's going to say get in here, and we're going to return voxel. And yeah, this just is a public accessor that returns the private variable. So, and let's set that equal to 1 by default for sand. All right. Now in the editor, we'll have access to the currently selected voxel, and we can index our palette. All right, so let's also get a reference. So serialize field, private. We're going to say TMP. We're going to say using TMP Pro, so Text Mesh Pro, which is going to be for our UI. So TMP text, and we're going to call this the text. And then we're also going to say an image. So image, and for this we're going to say using unity.ui, or what is it? Unity engine.ui. And we're going to call this the color of the currently selected voxel. All right. We're going to connect all this together. And in update, so private void update, we're going to set the text. So text.text is going to equal the palette at the currently selected voxel. So editor.voxel.name. And then the same thing for the color. We're going to say color dot, and I don't know how to actually, yeah, color.color is going to equal palette.color. All right, now all we have to do is create the UI. So let's go ahead into the hierarchy, create a UI, and let's call this, we're going to get a text from Text Mesh Pro. And now let's go into 2D, and let's click F while our mouse is in the scene, and that'll show us where our text is. All right, our text is empty, or it's not rendering at all. And I think I know the solution. So let's go ahead and we need to install, go under Window, Package Manager, and let's say Unity Registry, Text Mesh Pro, and I think, what's going on here? Oh, and Unity crashed. Unity crashed for some reason, but I'm back. So let's go ahead and try that again. So UI Text Mesh Pro, text, and there it is, TMP importer. So we need to import the TMP essentials. And there you can see the text barely. And in the game window you see it as well. So it's working now. All right, so let's go into the text. And what I'm going to do is click on the text and select this thing and hold Option or Alt, Shift, and I want it to be in the bottom corner. All right, and then we're also going to create an image. So UI image. I'm going to call this the color, and we're going to call this the name. And then for the color, we're going to do the same. Option Shift, bottom right. And now in here, what this has done when we did the Option Shift right, it puts the anchor points in the corner. So even if I resize the game window, they stay in the bottom right. All right, now let's move the text over a little bit, and let's change the image size. So I don't want it to be 100 by 100, so let's do 50 by 50. And before we continue resizing, actually we need to change the canvas. So let's go screen space overlay. Instead of constant pixel size, we're going to say scale with screen size. And I just do 1080 by 1920. There you go. All right. Oh, and that is not 1920. All right. Now let's go into our text and let's just move it closer to the color. And let's change, what do we want to change here? Let's change it so it's aligned to the left. And let's add a little bit of padding here, so move it just over a little bit, as well as centered. All right, now we can go into our editor visuals, drag in our voxel palette, our editor, and for that we need our player, and the text, so name, and the color. All right, so let's try this. Let's see. And yeah, you can see that we do indeed have our UI working. So sand, water, rock. All right, so let's go up and let's just place some sand. And we are indeed adding sand. And if I scroll for water, we are adding water. All right, so there's one thing I do want to change though. I don't like the fact that I have to click a ton when I just want to drop water and sand. So let's go into our voxel editor. And let's see, when we are not placing on the side of a block, when our raycast has not hit, let's change this to, we don't need to check if we're removing a block because we are not selected, right? Like there is no block next to us to remove, because otherwise if there is a block to remove, then the raycast is going to pick it up. So this is actually completely unnecessary. And in here, instead of get button down, instead of get button down, what I'm going to do is the secondary mouse button, if we hold it down, right? So this will let us hold it down. We'll add the voxel. And this way, if I hold the secondary mouse button, I can continuously drop water. But if I hold the primary mouse button, then I will just place one. So let's try this. Let's click play. Hopefully this works. Let's cross our fingers and pray that it does. And it does. And let's switch to water. And that is it for this video. I don't know if I'll be making any more, but if I did, it would be world generation and multi-threading. If you do have any other questions or requests that you want me to do, or you want to get one-on-one help and guidance on maybe multi-threading before I make a video on it, you're welcome to join my Discord and ask me. I'm always on there helping people all the time. I love answering your questions, so please come on there and ask me. I'll leave a link for the Discord in the description, but I hope you've enjoyed this series so far, and I'll see you in the next video, whatever that turns out to be.